Well, ladies and gentlemen, and whoever may listen to this show, of course, there's never a dull moment with this team. And even when you expect them to do the thing that it seems like it's the easiest accomplishment ever, though you may not want it to happen, it seems like they don't even do that accomplishment, right? You see the meme on the internet, our expectations were low for you, but holy fuck. That's the New York Football Giants right now. The New York Football Giants lost to the Carolina Panthers 20-17 on Sunday in Germany. So they lost overseas, and they lost to arguably the NFL's worst team, which puts them at a level of, hey, listen, the Giants are now the NFL's worst team. Considering the expectations and all this other stuff, I mean, what can I say, right? What can I say? I mean, strength of schedule also falls into play. The Giants are the number 2 pick as of right now. But I said in the preview that this would be a very important game for Daniel Jones. It would be a very important game for Brian Daboll and this Giants team in general, just on the objective side of the football, because, me and, fan talk, I'm not going to contaminate the show. Well, I didn't contaminate the show with it last Saturday and also last Friday when I was mixing up the recordings and stuff and did all the audio stuff. But they couldn't pull out this football game. And it goes, and I said this last week, it goes much more than Daniel Jones. There's just so many other I can't say there's like many problems on this team. Like they don't have to rebuild and start from scratch again, like per se the New York Jets. But this is still a bad situation. This is probably worse than I had them coming in this season. I had them winning to Washington, of course. I had them winning to, what did I have them winning to? I had them winning against Washington at least once, Minnesota, and Carolina. And I think that was it. And that's still better than what they did on Sunday. But there's never a dull moment in the worst way possible with this team. And now is when they start to throw out the rumors of Daniel Jones getting benched. Now, I think Brian Daboll said specifically, and sometimes, or I should say most of the time, this is likely when they pull a plug on a quarterback. Yeah, we're going to evaluate the position or whatever. I'm paraphrasing, of course, but that's usually telling the people we're going to sit Daniel Jones and we're not going to go back to him. And I don't blame Daniel Jones entirely because Daniel Jones has been this way. He's gotten progressively worse as a quarterback, but you also wasted a good portion of your season trying to put him out there as the scapegoat. Again, you guys know my opinion on Daniel Jones. It's not a high one. It's not a favorable opinion of Daniel Jones. But, and here's the thing, it all comes back full circle, right? You could say, oh, well, Drew Lock is not better than Daniel Jones. I don't disagree with you. I really don't. But there's two branches that stick off of that tree. We know that, but we want to see something new. We want to see something that's different. We want to give the offense a chance, maybe possible spark. And the other thing is, well, the Giants did this themselves. I'm going to review this in every possible scenario all over again. The Giants chose this. The Giants chose not to draft a quarterback. The Giants chose not to take a developmental quarterback just to see, okay, we have this guy in the pipeline. Maybe he could do a couple of different things for us. They chose to leave that off. They chose to come into a quarterback room, arguably the worst quarterback room in the league, with Tommy DeVito and Drew Lock. They had Nathan Rourke for a little bit in training camp, but he was just a camp body, and he didn't even play much at all. So they didn't really bring in any real competition. And again, that's the New York Giants' fault. John Mara, whoever's responsible, Brian Daboll, Joe Shane, I'd like to thank the front office too. But really those three guys, especially Brian Daboll and Joe Shane, for not coming in and bringing in competition for Daniel Jones because, let's just say you were in a position, right, where, okay, you were going to give it one more ride with Daniel Jones. At least put assets into a backup quarterback that's viable, and your season isn't over if Daniel Jones is hurt or he's benched. And the guarantee for the injury kicks in. If he gets, and it's not like, oh, if he sprains his pinky or something. If he gets like a tear, if he gets like a serious injury, that $23 million kicks in. Now, I don't know if Daniel Jones would waive that injury clause. I don't know if, I'm pretty sure that is possible because I know Russell Wilson didn't waive his injury clause with the Broncos. They sat his ass, and the Broncos were pretty much terrible throughout the rest of the season last year with Jarrett Stidham. But again, full circle, right? You go back to when he signed the contract. Okay, they at least had Tyrod Taylor, and you weren't able to do a couple different things financially, but this is where it kicks in, and I would argue actually that this is worse than last year because Daniel Jones, yeah, he got hurt last year, but you at least saw some different things. Tyrod Taylor was still a competent, viable quarterback. Tommy DeVito was decent, but you have just no options now. I mean, if you're a Giant fan looking at the rest of the season, there are people, including myself on the fan side, that are saying, I really don't want to win the rest of this year. Just make it competitive losses. I don't care if anyone gets fired at this point. I'll talk about that in a few minutes. But what was I going to say? There's going to be fans rooting for losses, and there's going to be fans that are like, hey, just win for the good feeling. I don't really believe in that. That's just my personal 2 cents. And then there's people going to be like, well, let's see what Neighbors does with the quarterback options. Let's see how Evan Neal does. We'll talk about him. But it's just like, the more we get down to the rest of the season, this is more of a team bigger picture. There's more bad that comes of all of this nonsense than good. Because you look at the defense, I mean, this is just an overview, but they gave up 188 yards on the ground, which is about 5.9 yards per carry. That's about 6 yards per carry, essentially. And you have some of these players, most of these players that Joe Shane brought in, and they're playing like garbage on defense. Now, I guaranteed the New York Giants held the Carolina Panthers to 20 points, but this is not some prolific offense. It's interesting that they gave up more points to the Panthers than they did the high-flying offense of Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and Joe Burrow. I mean, that's just interesting. But it's, what I other find interesting as well is that Ralph Vacchiano of SNY, after Daniel Jones missed that flea flicker, he was like, oh, the offensive line didn't give him much time. Like, how many more weeks are we doing this? Now, I will give the beat reporters outside of Vacchiano credit that they're really starting to hone in on this benching stuff, which, to be honest with you, you're a little late to the party, but I don't think you're that late considering that he actually has not been benched yet. So, with Joe Shane expected to speak this week for the New York Football Giants, I would load him with questions, right? I would load him with, hey, what's your draft class status, knowing that Evan Neal only started playing as of recent, Banks has been crap, Okereke hasn't been the same, stuff on offense, you can still ask about Daniel Jones, Jalen Hyatt not being on the field. So I think the beat media has a job to do for the fans of going out there and pressing the shit out of this regime, because whether you want to fire them or not, or you give them another year, or give them their quarterback, this regime hasn't done enough for the New York Giants to say you're guaranteed coming back, and the fans aren't happy with the product as they shouldn't be, right? There was winnable games down the stretch. The Giants ultimately lost these games because they're a bad football team. A bad football team, you lose games, you find ways to lose. Good teams find ways to win. But I'm going to try to go in order here with the quarterback and then the running backs and everything on offense. The Giants came out with a total of 17 points. They only had 2 plays above 20 yards, one of them being the Tyrone Tracy touchdown run. I forget what the other one was. It might have been another Tyrone Tracy run. Actually, no, it was a 23-yard reception, my mistake, by Wan'Dale Robinson. And, you could admire Daniel Jones, say, well, he at least spread the ball around. Well, I mean, Theo Johnson, 4 catches, 37. Hyatt, 4 for 39. Neighbors, 6 for 50. And Wan'Dale Robinson, 5 for 51. I mean, all those guys averaged. Robinson, surprisingly 10.2 yards per catch because he's got 7 yards per catch on the season, which is pretty terrible if you ask me. Then you have Malik Neighbors, who is 8.3 yards per catch. No good. Jalen Hyatt, 9.8 this game, and Theo Johnson, 9.3 this game. I mean, that's, again, a positive, right? So it's a positive for Jalen Hyatt, but we know it's not consistent because after the bye week, Darius Slayton's going to return. The Giants didn't trade him, and Jalen Hyatt will go back, and it'll be like a fart in the wind. So make that known. But I will point this out again. I find it very interesting and absolutely saddening, and also, again, to the meme I pointed out in the first half of the show, where it's like, our expectations were low, but holy fuck. I could say that about the entire team. I'm going to point to Daniel Jones in this aspect. I mean, he was god-awful. This is a horrific defense that he played. They have no pass rush whatsoever. I mean, they got 2 sacks, but this is a defense with no pass rush. Their linebackers are shit, and their cornerbacks are just okay. And Daniel Jones managed to have a 33.9 QBR, a 50.5 passer rating, and 2 INTs, and 1 rushing touchdown. So we're supposed to clap for progress. We can always, it used to be like this, right? It used to be like this, 2022 and back. It used to be, well, Daniel Jones just beats the bad opponents, right? I was talking with a friend, and me and him were, discussing about this game. And he said, as for Daniel Jones, I expected him to have a Colts game. The game he had against the Colts, which was 2 passing touchdowns and 2 rushing touchdowns. Giants ultimately blew them out 38-10, which is a game I went to. And he did not have that game. Instead, he had probably the complete opposite, where he had 5.1 yards per throw, or attempt at least, 190 yards, 22 of 37. So again, it's a point of emphasis that when the Giants make Daniel Jones throw for 30 times, it's no good. You're probably not winning the game. And, I mean, one of the first plays of the game was a 3rd and 7. At least it was 3rd and 7. It was a 3rd and long of some sorts. And Neighbors is open, and Daniel Jones totally airmails him. Like they're not on the same page. I think this is week 10 that we just finished up? There's no reason that you have to be... There's no reason that you shouldn't be on the same page as your receiver. And again, I'm blaming Daniel Jones for it. It's not like, we got to blame Malik Neighbors or this, that, and the other thing. No. Malik Neighbors, surprisingly, and this is a product of quarterback play, in my personal opinion, has not caught a touchdown, I want to say, since the game in Cleveland. So, put that in your pipe and smoke it. He's got 3 touchdowns on the season, 2 against Washington and 1 against Cleveland. Or maybe no, 1 against Washington, 2 against Cleveland. So, put that in your pipe and smoke it. But you have to miss the Neighbors, right? You have the flea flicker. I mean, put it to you this way. Was that the greatest play call in the world? No, it wasn't. Because most NFL teams right there would call a run play. It's a 3rd and 1. You can, how's this? Competent NFL teams convert that 3rd and 1. Run up the middle, short pass, something, right? Now, the New York Giants, as far as that flea flicker goes, I guess they wanted a spark. And it's just so, I don't want to say apropos, but it's just so weird that the Giants just continue to go through the motions on offense and get into first down. They get into second down. It's not like a modern-day NFL offense where teams consistently try to avoid 3rd down. They try to avoid 2nd down. They just try to get the ball down the field. It seemed like the Giants just inch for that first down. They take it so slow. Now, if we want to go over time of possession in this game for 30 seconds, it was 34-27. The Giants were in favor. Of course, because of the overtime, it's a little uneven. But just a complete comparison to the rest of the league, at least the rest of the competent NFL, The Giants don't go for first down on first down. They go for, let's do a 3-yard out pattern, a 4-yard stick route, and they always end up in third down, which, again, that's a product of Brian Dable being his head up his ass. That's a product of Daniel Jones not being a good quarterback. But let's go back to the flea flicker. I can tell it's like not very good play calling, but that shit has to be executed. And Daniel Jones missed 2 wide open receivers. There was pressure eventually, but Daniel Jones, when he got the ball back, should have airmailed it. I think it was Robinson that was going across the field first, then it was Neighbors, or vice versa, if you look at the screenshot. But, I mean, that's really the microcosm of Daniel Jones' 2024 season, is he can't hit open guys. It seems like the problems have shown up more this year than any other year in the NFL that he's been in. And it's sad, too, because I believe Brian Dable has been his best coach. Doesn't mean he's the all-world coach, but I think he's been his best coach compared to Pat Shurmur and Joe Judge and all these other different cats. But, I mean, Daniel Jones was playing decent football in 21. He played average football in 20. I mean, that was just I don't really want to think about that season. 2019, obviously, he had his turnovers, which I would take his 2019 season 10 times over this one. 22 is a simplified playbook and Kafka calling the plays. And then 23, you saw spurts of like just regression. And this year, because we've seen more of a sample size, it's just terrible. It's just god awful. And, you know, he's missing receivers wide open again. He continues to not throw with anticipation. His pocket presence is terrible. So it seems like everything is just collapsing into itself at once for Daniel Jones. And it's awful. Now, I forget where he placed the first interception. However, that second interception is a tale of Daniel Jones, right? He gets it intercepted by Josie Jewell. Now, of course, if you take a look, right, that throw was way behind Tyrone Tracy. Maybe Tracy could have snagged it a little bit more. Maybe that's like the reachiest argument you have. But, I mean, ball placement. Place that ball a little bit more in front. Lead Tyrone Tracy. Problem again with Daniel Jones is, hey, he doesn't know how to lead his receivers. And Tracy literally had to come back to the ball like that. And then Josie Jewell. So, can't say I'm surprised with that. Can't say I'm surprised. Again, I'm trying to... Oh, yeah, I see the first interception, which was popped up in the air. He throws it right into the palms. And not like the palms as if he caught it, but the palms as if he's going to bat it up like a fucking air balloon. Jadeveon Clowney pops it up, and it's intercepted by Xavier Woods. So, I really don't know, like, was Daniel Jones trying to be a clown in that situation? Like, he was trying to do some circus magic shit? Because it clearly didn't work. At that play, you either go around Jadeveon Clowney or you just accept defeat and throw it away. I don't know if Clowney came up more on the bootleg and maybe somebody should have chipped him. I don't know what the scenario was, but that's still Daniel Jones' fault. I don't give a shit that it was tipped once, twice, a million times. That's Daniel Jones' fault. And I think the overall consensus is that he played a terrible game. This, in my opinion, is the icing on the cake. It's the icing on the cake. And the Giants will try to convince us, or maybe the Daniel Jones people, the Daniel Jones media, let's say, will try to convince us, well, this is eventually when Drew Lock or Tommy DeVito step on the field. Well, Daniel Jones wouldn't have made that throw. Well, Daniel Jones this, Daniel Jones that. Da, 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 da. It's like, the Giants did. You're not telling me anything. You're telling the Giants something, because the Giants did not bring in a viable backup quarterback. Drew Lock, I mean, he's decent, but Jameis was on the market. There's a couple other guys that were on the market, so I don't really need to hear the excuses. I'm sorry, I really don't need to hear the fucking excuses. So there's that. I'm really done talking about the quarterback. Tyrone Tracy. I'll talk about a quick positive before I go to a couple of the different things. Tyrone Tracy, he pounds the rock. He did have a fumble. He had two of them, actually, where he fumbled out of bounds. And then he fumbled on one of the first snaps of overtime. And you know what? I feel bad. I really do, right? And I'm going to put some fanhood into this. Feel free to tap out for 2 seconds and come back in. There's a going joke in Giantland that Tyrone Tracy may have saved the Giants because he fumbled and the Giants lost and the Giants are up that high in the draft for a quarterback. But realistically speaking, on the objective side of things, it should never really have come down to Tyrone Tracy fumbling that football. And again, his mistake. I think that's his first fumble of the season, and it was a pivotal one that he lost. And I feel bad for him. I feel bad. I mean, of course he's going to, he seems like a hardworking kid. I think he's, 24, 25 years old. So he's a veteran. He's still learning the running back position. He plays it really well. But as far as that kind of going on him, it shouldn't be, the game was pretty much over on the Tyrone Tracy fumble. I mean, of course it was over, but you don't get in that position if it wasn't for a few things. Your defense could have made several plays. Your quarterback stinks. So that's two, by the way. Let me just say this right now. The difference between winning and losing this football game. The Giants, in specific Daniel Jones, had two red zone INTs. Two red zone INTs. So effectively, you take 6 points off the board and you end up with what you got in 17. Now, let's just say the Giants do what they do best. They don't convert. And boom, right? The Giants convert whatever. The third down, what am I thinking? They kick the 2 field goals. So that's 6 points. Giants win 23-20. You could also say, well, Graham Gano shouldn't have missed that field goal. I mean, to be honest with you, my expectations have kind of lowered for Graham Gano because he's also 36, 37 years old. And the Giants need to probably search out for a kicker within the next, I'd say, year or so. I don't know when Graham Gano got extended by the Giants. I want to say it was after 22 because he was pretty good in 22. Let's see. When was Graham Gano extended? He was extended in just before the 2023 season. And then, of course, he ended the season last year and this and the third, whatever. So I'm kind of like lacking in terms of expectations for Graham Gano. But he did tie the game with a field goal. And the Giants would have gotten 6 more points had their quarterback not been a complete idiot and thrown those 2 red zone interceptions. And I will say this, right? In addition to what I've said about Tracy and all these other different things and Daniel Jones, it is an absolute bad reflection on Brian Daboll. An honest reflection. An honest, bad reflection. That this offense, in total, ranks 32nd in the NFL. Because guess what? You look at the past few years of Giants football. Let's go back to 2016, maybe. Why not? You have Ben McAdoo's offense that wasn't good. They weren't 32nd. You have Pat Shurmur's offense. They were probably within the teens and upper 20s. They were not 32nd. Jason Garrett's offense. Well, the first year was 31st. The next year, I believe, was 32nd because you had Mike Glennon and Jake Fromm, and that was also the New York Giants trying to save face and avoid controversy with the whole Daniel Jones thing. They didn't want a good backup quarterback, so they got Mike Glennon. And then 2022, right? We go to 2022. The Giants have a low teens, high 20s offense. And then 2023, they're still not 30th, but they're probably within the low 20s. And then now you are 32nd. With Malik Neighbors, Daniel Jones, Tyrone Tracy, count all the names you can. 2 things. A, you're also worse And most of the time, and I know this is a casual take, most of the time nobody's going to care about scenario. They'll just say, you're the 32nd ranked offense. Explain that to me. Or say, how do you justify that? Maybe that's what John Mara or Joe Shane would say in an exit interview with Brian Daboll. You took the play calling away from Mike Kafka, and arguably you had a statistically worse offense. Please explain to me how that happened and how you justify that and why we should keep you. Because Kafka's going to be gone. I don't see him coming back and trying to either reclaim his role, because he's going to have to be under Daboll's wing, which, to be honest, I don't know if that made sense in the first place, because Kafka came from Kansas City and Daboll came from Buffalo, which those are two prolific offenses, but two very different offenses at the same time. So he'll probably go elsewhere for an OC job and actually get a real shot and get, maybe he'll go under a defensive guy or a special teams guy and actually have a say in calling the offense. So you have that, but it's just a bad reflection on Brian Daboll, not just because of his play calling, but his commitment, his overcommitment to Daniel Jones. And the Giants have lost 8 games with Daniel Jones this season. They've won 2 games with Daniel Jones this season. His consistency has been pretty bad for the most part. And, of course, he's been consistent. He's been consistently shit the last 4 games. Let's see. Bengals, he was pretty bad. Not Seahawks. Eagles, pretty bad. Steelers, pretty bad. Washington, pretty bad. So that's like 5 games right there. You could say, oh, well, Daniel Jones had a good second half against the Steelers. Or he had a good second half against Washington. Second halves are not 60 minutes. They do not count as full games. So, out of the positives, I will say, now you can't really take too much stock into this, and this is probably going to continue until we get to the Saints game. But the offensive line, I thought they played well. They did make a late maneuver where they put Jermaine Lemonor at the left tackle position, and they put Evan Neal at the right tackle position. And, of course, as I said, really coming in with our guest Matt Alkiza, I said basically, as he did too, that this Panthers pass rush is clearly non-existent. Now, they did get 2 sacks. One of them on the flea flicker, which was A'Shawn Robinson, and the other one being DJ Wanham. So, in terms of that, they had a pretty decent day for Carolina Panthers' sake. But as far as you take the quarterback out of that situation, the offensive line played well. They had a tremendous day run blocking, which the Giants, that's where they did well. 167 yards, 34 carries, 4.9 yards per carry, and 2 touchdowns. So that rises their rushing rank, and of course that does well for the offensive line in terms of run blocking, which this is a unit that really wasn't made to run block. But specifically, I'll talk about Evan Neal for a second. I watched, I would say, about 2-3 minutes of a 5-minute reel, or was a 7-minute reel of his snaps against the Carolina Panthers, and this was, of course, thanks to Nick Filato. He put it out on Twitter, so I had the opportunity to watch. Run blocking, he did well. He did well in the run blocking game, which really wasn't a concern. Now, as far as the pass blocking goes, the results, you'll listen to what I'm saying, the results were better. The technique is still bad. There are plays where some of his footwork is off, but it just seems like the head hanging is still there. The balance is still off, to where there's certain plays where he doesn't stick to a rusher, this, that, and the third. So you can only fix a player so much. Now, if you were to ask me, Alex, would you put Chris Hubbard at right tackle, or would you put Azudu at right tackle, or would you put the Beckett left tackle? I would still, honestly, considering Evan Neal wasn't a train wreck, I would probably stick to the guys that you have right now. Lemonor, Runyon, Schmitz, Van Roten, and Neal. I would stick to those guys. And I guess the thing you could hope for is that Van Roten's pass blocking ability. Now, he really hasn't shown that this year. But if he has any pass blocking ability left, throw it off to a guy in Evan Neal, and maybe he gets better. And of course, this is Evan Neal's first game, really first week with this number one unit. So that's that. And of course, I would prefer Neal and his results over Josh Ezeudu at left tackle. And again, this is really not a good defense for Joe Shane or Brian Dable when they get asked, why was Evan Neal not playing right tackle or on the offensive line at all in the first 10 weeks? Because if you guys remember, yes, we did have Andrew Thomas for the first few weeks. Yes, the offensive line was stable. But who was the jumbo tackle? Who was the swing tackle? It was Josh Ezeudu. So my advice to the Giants regime is stop trying to justify a draft pick. Put Ezeudu as the fourth tackle. Illuminor, Neal, Chris Hubbard, and then, if anything, Ezeudu. That's my personal opinion. But if you guys haven't already, please go to SeatGeek, and $20 off you could get on your online order with the promo code Big Blue in the Bronx. Going to a tailgate, going to a game, going to a concert. Use the promo code Big Blue in the Bronx to get $20 off on your entire order. You will be glad that you did. So let's talk about this defense. Disappointed, I will say. Now, they only allowed 20 points, which, to be honest with you, is still a letdown considering how vaunted this supposed defense was supposed to be. And this was a piss-poor offense. For the Carolina Panthers, they still ranked at the bottom of the league. Bryce Young is still not a good quarterback, though he outdueled Daniel Jones. He had 126 passing yards, 1 touchdown. So I can't really fault them in the passing game. The only thing I'll fault them in the passing game is that they only got 1 sack and 4 quarterback hits. Roches, Lawrence, Brian Burns, and Azeez Ojulari, they had the quarterback hits. So basically your starting defensive line, 1 quarterback hit each, and then a sack by Brian Burns. But everyone else, even the guys who had 1 quarterback hit, non-existent. I mean, you saw Lawrence show up a couple of times against Cade Mays and Burns here and there and around the square. But Azeez was nowhere to be found. To be completely honest, he was nowhere to be found. And this is interesting because it's a week after the Giants don't trade him. And I specifically said the Giants should go out there, right? Go out there, trade Slayton if you can, trade Ojulari if you can. And what happened? The Giants held on to Ojulari because they felt that they didn't get a high enough get enough compensation or wood in that trade. And they also felt that they value Slayton. They value Darius Slayton. I really don't know how you value a guy who you wanted to take a pay cut. Seems kind of odd to me. Odd optics. So I was pissed, right, that this, and I get it, right? The Carolina Panthers, Dan Morgan did a pretty decent job of revitalizing this offensive line in Carolina. But you paid Brian Burns a lot of money to rush the passer. You kept Ojulari because you think he's going to be a part of the future. Lawrence, he's on and off as far as this game goes. And you have no depth outside of Dexter Lawrence. And I have a huge problem with this run defense. I mean, you forced a fumble. 1 turnover. I don't know who forced it, but DJ Davidson recovered it. Give him 188 rushing yards on the ground. Bryce Young had 30. He had a 24-yard run, and he also had a 6-yard run. But Chuba Hubbard, this is a guy that came in. He's a very average NFL back. He's not like a star. Came out of Oklahoma a couple of years ago. I think his rookie year was actually when the Giants played the Panthers in 21. And, he had 28 carries and 53 yards. That was his career high. So if you're Chuba Hubbard, you're celebrating this week. You're going to the club. You're doing this. You're doing that. Because you're on your bye week. You probably should be studying, but you're on your bye week. And right after you get paid to be extended for 4 years, you have a season high and a career high in rushing yards. That's a great week for Chuba Hubbard. And let's take a look at this objectively. The New York Football Giants threw us a facade. They threw us a mirage of games against Cleveland, Dallas, a little bit, Seattle, and Cincinnati. Those were games that the Giants didn't allow too many rushing yards. They didn't, right? Let's see if I can get the stats up ready. Actually, I could get the scores up better yet. So, you take a look at, let's go week by week. Let's start in week 3. All right, the game I went to in Cleveland. Highest leading rusher was Devin Singletary, 65 yards, and a touchdown. Boom. Followed the next week. Leading rusher was Rico Dowdle, 11 carries, 46 yards. Week 5, against the Seattle Seahawks. The leading rusher of that game was Tyrone Tracy, 129 yards and 18 carries. You followed that game up with Week 6 against the Cincinnati Bengals. The lead rusher was Daniel Jones, 11 carries, 56 yards. Those were teams that didn't want to run it too much. They really didn't want to put an emphasis on the running game. So you had the Browns, right? You had the Cleveland Browns. You had the Dallas Cowboys. You had the Seattle Seahawks, and then you had the Cincinnati Bengals. And this is where it kind of goes into deep shit. Because week 1, you got a semi-pass. Week 2, you got your ass beat in the ground game. Giants go against the Eagles, 17 carries, 176 yards, and a touchdown for Saquon Barkley. You go to week 8, the following week against the Pittsburgh Steelers. What happens? Tyrone Tracy does go off for 145 yards, but Najee Harris, a guy who, I'm going to be honest, isn't that good of a running back. 19 carries, 114 yards. No touchdowns on the ground, but they still allowed a total of 5.4 carry, right? Move to week 9 against the Washington Commanders. Now, Tyrone Tracy, he still led the pack, and the Giants got their own rushing game going. But Chris Rodriguez, Jaden Daniels, Austin Eckler, and Jeremy McNichols got to 149 yards. If you take McNichols out of it, because he got 8 carries for 20, then you probably have the yards per carry, which was 3.9, go up. So they still got absolutely obliterated against the run. Not as bad as week 2, but they still got obliterated. And, of course, you go to this week, 28 carries, 153 yards for Chuba Hubbard, and a touchdown, 5.5 per pop, with 26 yards being his biggest. So I think there's really 2 problems with the Giants' run defense. And it's just weird that the last 2 coordinators were very good against the run, or had their teams very good against the run, and then they come here and it's shit. So it's one of two things to one of two things. One of two things being it's either personnel or scheme, or maybe you go back to 4-3. Because I don't remember the last time the Giants were a consistently good run defense. It seems like it was a long time ago. I think the Giants, let's take a look at 2020, because I know 2020 they had a decent defense. I still think from my recollection that they were a bad defense. Let's see, 2020, bad run defense at least, because I know they were at least good in the passing game, even with the shitty-ass corners that they had. So passing, no, that's not what we want to do. Rushing, here we go. Giants rushing defense, where did they rank? Oh, shit, okay. So prove me wrong, will you? They ranked within the top 15, top 12 even. So that was the last time the New York Giants had at least a solid run defense. And then they ranked top 20 in pass defense with a rotating second corner spot of Isaac Yadam and Corey Ballantyne and Ryan Lewis, and it was just weird. But this is a better talented run defense. This is a better talented defense overall. And it comes down to one of two things. Really two things you could say. Certain guys not playing to their potential and the DBs. Now, something that's not talked about, because the offense has been so bad, is the absolute regression of Bobby Okereke. Micah McFadden, we knew coming in that this probably would have been more of his scheme, though there were doubts, because they had Deontay Johnson and this guy and that guy coming in to try to oust him out of his role. And McFadden was the guy who faced the music and rose above it. To where Bobby Okereke, I mean, he's forced one fumble this season. He hasn't been the tackling monster that he was in the past. And he's just not that impactful. He was made for a Wink Martindale scheme. And he absolutely succeeded under Wink Martindale. And of course, this is kind of the opposite, but it still had the same results of what happened in that second year with Blake Martinez with Patrick Graham. In that second year, he still wasn't as good as the first year, and he didn't make a Pro Bowl. Of course, he later got injured towards ACL. But this is bad, considering this is a high-priced free agent that Joe Schoen invested in. I think he's got another year on his contract because the Giants kicked some money over. So that's not good. I mean, you're not going to fire Shane Bowen because of one player. Your defense has done better than the offense significantly. So Bobby Okereke, the guy who you signed in free agency as your marquee guy in 23, needs to figure it out, right? How about your DBs not playing well, right? Deonte Banks, I mean, he's still struggling. He's struggling against the pass. He's allowing key receptions. He didn't allow a touchdown, to my knowledge at least he didn't. Reception or two to Jalen Coker and then Leggett. Again, it wasn't like a beatdown in the passing game, but you still had some bad plays. Dane Belton was horrible in coverage. That was a very mysterious pick. Still kind of remains that way for the New York Giants and Joe Schoen and this coaching staff and this front office. And one thing that puzzled me, I don't think I talked about this on the last show, is how the Giants cut Nick McLeod. And it's just weird optics because we saw in the first 3 weeks of the season they were playing roster gymnastics, right? They cut Carter Coughlin. They kept Carter Coughlin. They signed Jakob Johnson. They cut Jakob Johnson. I mean, there was a number of things going on. And again, roster gymnastics. They had 51 guys on the active roster. They didn't have a kicker in week 2. To where you zoom in 8 weeks, and guess what happens? You want Nick McLeod, who you signed for $3 million. $3 million. It's not $10 million. $3 million. You signed him for that much this season. I think it was a render, or you re-signed him, whatever. I should say tender, not render. And you asked him to take a pay cut, and he said no, so you cut him. And now he's on the 49ers practice squad, and that's still a good team, despite their quirks in their locker room. I mean, the 49ers look like Disney World compared to us, where we look like the Staten Island dump. I mean, it's pretty bad. So, and it's not like he was some bum corner. Was he like this great corner? No. But if Deonte Banks or Dory Jackson goes down, or Cornell Flott goes down, guess what happens? You have Nick McLeod. Who do you have on the back end now? And also, McLeod was a premier special teamer. Who do you have now on that back end? You have Art Green on that back end. You have Art Green. This is your cornerback room, folks. Trey Hawkins, Andrew Phillips, Adoree Jackson, Cordell Flott, Banks, Art Green. And if you take somebody off the practice squad, it's Greg Stroman. Other than that, no bueno. You have nobody else. And Art Green was a practice squad guy with Denver. So, if it gets to the rest of the season and your corners start getting injured, I'm going to point at not taking a corner early in the draft or taking it seriously in free agency. And I'm going to point at this because McLeod was not a superstar, but he was a solid corner that you choose to cut him because he didn't want to take a pay cut, and it's just weird. The optics are weird by this organization. So I think I was gonna talk about Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen a little bit and the firing stuff and some of the rumors that have been coming out. I'm gonna save that either for a video or a live stream that will be turned into a podcast episode. So if you're on social media, just stay tuned. I'm gonna see if I could get a content creator on or two, try to discuss this mess of a Giants season. But I appreciate you guys tuning in. Like, comment, subscribe. Turn on post notifications so you know when a live stream pops or a video drops. I appreciate you guys coming back. Share out. Use the SeatGeek code. Talk to you guys soon and keep that blood pressure low.